Hello again. This is the Midnight Skeptic. Once again, I'm getting ready to record here. So, step one, play the play in music. You are listening to KPCA LP, Petaluma, California, at 103.3 FM and worldwide at www.kpca.fm. And this is the Midnight Skeptic. The views of the Midnight Skeptic are not, repeat, not necessarily the views of KPCA or any of its affiliates. Well, okay, this is the Midnight Skeptic, show number 24 of this new regime when I started actually doing the radio version and the YouTube version and everything. And the radio version of what I'm recording right now is going to be broadcast on KPCA LP 103.3 FM this Sunday night. The Memorial Day weekend, Sunday night. I'm sure that you won't have anything better to do out there than to listen to me, but I'm going to be on at 9 p.m. as my usual time. And let me make some adjustments here. I had a fright because the screen on the computer, this screen was just a blank. And fortunately, I was able to call my audiovisual technician, Dennis, and he guided me through. We have a connection where he takes over control of my computer remotely, and so he did that, and we both clicked a few things, which I'm totally unfamiliar with, and only he can fix, but it worked. So thank you again, Dennis. So this is Thursday afternoon. It's right now. It's 3 o'clock. And a few shout outs. I'll buzz through them right quick because I have a lot to get to on this show. A lot of things have been happening. Republicans are still evil, and I'll talk about them. Okay, shout out Stan and Cassidy down in Pacifica, Rich and Kathy. Not the same Kathy, by the way. Rich and Kathy Berger over in Sebastopol. My brother Brandon and Mina, and Brandon took his little nephew, the older of the three terrorists, out to a Giants Arizona Diamondbacks game, and that was Isaac's first real baseball game, and the Giants won. And the Arizona Diamondbacks are just having a struggle this year. They're not really very good. And my niece, Andrea, who's the mother of the three little terrorists, she's a nurse down at, I'm not sure which hospital, but it's right near Santan Valley. And she's living there with her husband, Tim, and who's a retired Marine Corps sergeant, and he was in military police there. Okay. And the Sonora crowd, Darrell, Judy May, Rosamalia Negrete Lopez, and Bob and Sandy Fisher up in Sonora, and their daughter, Martha, who is also a nurse up there. All the nurses in my family, take care of yourselves. Okay, Dave Rubin and his wife Vicky over in Raleigh-Durham, and Nelson and Alice Lydell. I'm beginning to worry about you guys. I haven't heard either phone calls or emails or anything. Okay, after this recording is over, I'm going to give you guys a call. I hope you're okay down there. Nelson, retired U.S. Public Health Service officer whose specialty was researching and improving breathing masks, and which is a skill we need in these COVID-19 times. Okay, out on Long Island, Geraldine Goldfinger, and geez, let's see, Daryl, Judy, Leonidas. Oh God, I forgot to mention her up in Sonora, and Rosie Lopez Negretti down in Mexico City, and then locally Tim Conrad, the great photographer who was part of the Sonora crowd, but moved down here to God's greatest town, and Mickey Huff, the godfather of Project Censored. His show is on Wednesdays here at KPCA LP 103.3 FM at 3 o'clock, I believe, is when he does his show. And then that show is repeated over in Berkeley, 94.1 FM on KPFA. And that's on Fridays at 1 o'clock. Okay, enough of the oh, Karina Hilliard, down in Patagonia, Arizona. Can't forget her. She's my favorite skeptic, and she's also the animal control officer of Patagonia, Arizona. I really like her. She's a kick. And okay, enough of the shout outs. Okay, my past show, actually my two past shows, were more or less concerned with reparations to blacks in this country. Should we? Should we not? Why should we? Why should we not? Blah, blah, blah. I've talked about those things. And this show, the primary subject of this show will be a continuation of that. But we are closing in on a 100th anniversary of a very, very, very sad date in our country's history. I got to back up just a minute. The last show, I owe you guys all an apology because I was having sinus issues or a cold or a small flu outbreak or something. I don't know what it was, but I had to turn away from the microphone, and sometimes I forgot to turn away from the microphone and do a big old hairy-assed sniff and get this stuff out of my nose. It's gone. Whatever it was is gone, so no harm, no foul. I hope you all will forgive my sniffs on the last show. Okay, what is this 100th anniversary that's looming for this country? On June 1st, the beginning of a white massacre. History books and articles dealing with that usually refer to it as a race riot. Well, that kind of implies that there were, whites, 100 or so whites fighting 100 or so blacks. They're both armed and both killing each other. That's not the case. There were a small handful of whites that did die, but the estimates are that there was about 300 plus dead black people in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And specifically, it's a village, not a village, it was a suburb of Tulsa called Greenwood, which was termed the Black Wall Street because it was a very, very prosperous black town. I'm not sure whether it was part of the city limits of Tulsa. Tulsa was a booming oil workers' town at that time, and we're talking about 1921. But anyway, the township, I guess you could call it, of Greenwood had banks. They had all sorts of shops. They had hotels, theaters, movie theaters that were just beginning to come into use as what we think of as movie theaters today. Shoeshine parlors, barbershops, the whole 9 yards. It was a very prosperous town. And the money that came into Greenwood was, in addition to the people that actually worked in Greenwood, many of the blacks in Greenwood worked for whites in the greater Tulsa area, maybe even some towns that were outside of Tulsa. They were maids, cooks, gardeners, um, auto repair people, shoe repair people, anything that earned money from the whites eventually filtered into the city of Greenwood. Okay, there's a couple of things that I want to read to you. Now, there's an article in Smithsonian, and it was April of this year. So, a couple of months ago. And I'm just going to really quickly go down the introduction to this article. It's a grabber introduction to this article. At 5:08 a.m. on June 1st, 1921, a whistle pierced the pre-dawn quiet of Tulsa, Oklahoma. There was disagreement later about whether the sound came from a steam engine on the railroad tracks or from a factory in the center of the booming oil town. But there was no doubting its meaning. It was the signal for as many as 10,000, yes, you heard that right, 10,000, armed white Tulsans, some dressed in army uniforms, because the World War I had just recently ended, and Army veterans were being mustered out, like the year of, it was November of 1918 that the actual armistice came about, and the 11th hour of the 11th month, which was November 11th, and we celebrate it today as Veterans Day. Back then, it was Armistice Day. Anyway, there were still veterans that still had their weapons and still had their uniforms. And anyway, Sioux Tulsans, dressed in army uniforms from their service in World War I to attack the place known as Greenwood, the city's uniquely prosperous African-American community. From every place of shelter up and down the tracks came screaming, shouting men to join in the rush toward the Negro section. A white witness named Coe Phillips later remembered. This was his actual quote. Quote, from every place of shelter up and down the tracks came screaming, shouting men to join the rush toward the Negro section. White witness, Coe Phillips. And the quote goes on. By dawn, quote, machine guns. World War I, they still had some of them. I don't know exactly where they got them or why they weren't turned in to, when these guys got mustered out of the Army. You kind of have to give your automatic weapons back to the Army. Anyway, quote, machine guns were sweeping the valley with their murderous fire, recalled a Greenwood resident named Dimple Bush. Quote, old women and men and children were running and screaming everywhere. Well, that's the introduction to this article. I'm not going to read the whole article to you, but there's a couple of things that I do want to emphasize. The trouble had begun the day before, meaning May 31st. A black teenage shoeshine boy named Dick Rowland had been arrested and charged with assaulting a white girl. Isn't that always the way it goes? In an elevator of a downtown Tulsa building. She was the elevator operator, and she was 15 years old. Even white police detectives thought the accusations were dubious. The consensus later was that whatever happened between them was innocuous. Perhaps that Rowland had stepped on the toe of the young Sarah Page, P-A-G-E was her name, when the elevator lurched. But that was academic after the Tulsa Tribune, one of the city's two white newspapers, ran an incendiary editorial under a headline residents remember as to, this is a quote, this is the headline, "To lynch Negro tonight." Okay, that evening, black community leaders met in the Greenwood newspaper office of A.J. Smitherman to discuss a response to that white newspaper's headline. Already a white mob had gathered outside the courthouse in Tulsa, where Roland was being held. Some African American leaders counseled patience, citing the promise of Sheriff Willard McCullough to protect Roland. Others wouldn't hear of it. A cadre of about 25 black residents, some in their own army uniforms, and carrying rifles, shotguns, pistols, axes, garden hose, and rakes, drove south from Greenwood and marched the final blocks to the courthouse, where Dick Roland was being held in a holding cell, I presume. At about 10:30 p.m., when a second group of 75 or so residents marched to the courthouse, an elderly white man tried to grab the gun of a black World War I veteran. A shot went off. Nobody knows who shot it in the air or what really happened. These things always get very muddled. A shot went off during the scuffle. Scores of other shots were fired in the panic that followed. Men, women, and children dove for cover behind trees and parked cars, but as many as a dozen people of both races ended up dead. Okay, that's not the end of this. That's the fuse that started it off. Okay, and the next day, June 1st, these 10,000 armed whites marched on the town of Greenwood to, I don't know, get rid of the blacks, burn the town down, just take out their frustrations. White mobs broke into houses as well as businesses, robbing cash, clothing, jewelry, keepsakes, and other personal belongings. So it was a looting frenzy, really, is what it was. And let's see, what else did I circle here? Today, okay, all right, I'm not going to go into everything that happened. This whole article goes into it, but there was a flatbed truck with sides on it that went through the town of Greenwood, picking up bodies, and the bodies of blacks, and just stacking them in there like cordwood. And the bodies were taken just outside of town of Greenwood into a hastily dug pit, dumped in there, and covered up with dirt. And the white-owned tractors and things covered the pit back up. Okay, well, cut ahead 100 years, which is like, okay, today's the 27th. Okay, 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st, May 1st. Okay, this coming Monday will be the actual 100-year anniversary of this atrocity. A number of years before today, residents of Greenwood and other black leaders in the town of Tulsa have been making a concerted effort to try to locate these mass graves and, well, identify them, because a lot of people lost loved ones back in that white massacre. And that is an occurrence in our nation's history that has gone untaught in schools. And I never heard about it until recently. A year ago, these articles here and there started cropping up about the Tulsa race riot. Well, okay, we've had race riots before in this country, the LA race riots, the Chicago race riots. You know, you don't, this is magnitudes of evilness way above just a race riot. This was a white massacre of blacks. There's no other way to describe this. And there's going to be a memorial set up in what was the black section called Greenwood. I've never been through the town of Tulsa, let alone Greenwood, so I don't know what it actually looks like now, whether the businesses have been rebuilt at all. I don't know that. But there is talk of the town of Tulsa erecting a memorial. And boy, I hope that it's sensitively done and that blacks themselves design it, build it, maintain it. But this just has to be dealt with. Okay, there's somebody that said this, and it's quoted right here. I can't imagine how devastating that would be. Okay, what's that? It's just unimaginable heartache and bitterness that comes from that. Okay, there's this one quote from a lady, a black lady. I guess she's a resident of Tulsa or Greenwood now. Quote, when we would pass by Oaklawn Cemetery, it's one of the town's cemetery, and I'm not sure whether it was a white cemetery or a black cemetery or whether they were integrated. Maybe they are. I don't know. But she says, when we would pass by Oaklawn Cemetery, the comment would always be made, you know they're still over there, meaning the dead bodies in some sort of a pit. Okay. Yeah, the first step toward lasting reconciliation is to face ugly truths, says Phil Armstrong, project director for the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission, and they're going to be erecting this memorial. There is no more hiding it. This is the guy, Phil Armstrong. I'm holding it up. It's Phil Armstrong, and he's the one who just said this. Flannery O'Connor has a quote that applies here. And I think Flannery O'Connor died in the mid-1950s, something like that. But anyway, the truth does not change according to your ability to stomach it. Okay, we have got to stomach these harsh truths. And, okay, there's another article that just appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle 3 days ago that I ripped out, and I want to read to you. Okay, here is, okay, before I go on to the San Francisco Chronicle article, Nate Calloway, a descendant of J.B. Stratford, who was a hotel owner back in the pre-massacre days, visits the site of the former Stratford Hotel. I fantasize about squatting on that land and daring them to remove me. Okay. I got very upset. They took away all that property from those people, meaning the blacks that lived in Greenwood, and they replaced it with plaques. And here is Nate Calloway. Okay, so we are burying in our schools a lot of very uncomfortable history. And race theory is being objected to by, well, who else would object to the truth being told? Republicans, of course. Oh boy, I'm having another brain freeze, and I apologize for this one, but I talked about it in the last show, and it was okay. Republican-controlled states, meaning the governor and the state houses, are passing all sorts of laws. Man, this is so frustrating. I wasn't. Oh, CRT. Okay, it is CRT. CRT. I'm trying to think of what the C of the CRT is. Critical. God. Critical race theory. Okay. In most of the states that are controlled by the ridiculous Republicans, they are trying to pass laws banning CRT, critical race theory, from being talked about in our classrooms, usually in history classrooms. Leave it to the Republicans to, one, deny history, two, prevent history being taught, honest history being taught to our children. What the Republicans would like us to teach is our country. Well, first of all, Trump made our country great again, which he did not. What they would like to be taught is Walt Disney type history. Everything is nice. Everybody gets along. Nobody ever did anything wrong in our history. Every person that fought in the Revolutionary War was this brave warrior against the evil George III British troops, and blah, blah, blah. Critical race theory tries to answer the question, is America essentially a racist country or not? It is my belief that we are. And that should not be anything that our country should be embarrassed about. This thing about learning from history is the most important thing about history. Which brings us to reparations. Okay, how on earth can a cash payout or giving individual blacks a plot of land or anything, any combination of that, how could that possibly make up for the wrongs that were done? And not just the Tulsa massacre, but all the lynchings that went on throughout our history. It can't really make up for it. However, one of the problems that plague us today as a result of this maltreatment of blacks in our culture is that there is a yawning wealth gap between whites and blacks. And it's not just that either. There's a yawning wealth gap between whites and Latinos. And there's a yawning wealth gap between the classes. We aren't just a racist country, we are a classist country. And I'm not a Marxist, although a lot of the observations that Karl Marx made about societies in general is that class wealth gaps and privilege gaps work to the detriment of everybody, not just the rich people. So I'm wrestling with this concept in my own mind, and I haven't come to a conclusion yet of whether reparations should be paid out in some way, shape, or form to blacks. Certainly they were enslaved up until the Civil War, and in some cases beyond that during what's called Reconstruction. And I went into this in the last show. In 1876, the presidential election we had back in those days, Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden, I believe, was the Democratic guy. Hayes was the Republican. Anyway, a backroom deal was agreed to. If Rutherford B. Hayes became the president, the Republican president, then he would agree to end Reconstruction. Well, there was really nothing reconstructed about the South. The Ku Klux Klan and other guerrilla groups were terrorizing blacks who tried to vote, who tried to claim their property rights, such as they were at the time. But in any event, the legacy of the Civil War, the ill-conceived and unfulfilled Reconstruction, has resulted in today, 2021, this yawning wealth gap that Bernie Sanders, for one, and other quite progressive politicians and organizations are in favor of trying to rectify. It's very, very difficult to reset the clock, get us back to square one, and begin to suddenly treat everybody as absolute equals. It's just, would giving every black individual in this country $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, would that work? Would that satisfy them? I kind of doubt that it would satisfy them. There have been in this country fairly recently, and I'm not sure of the year of this, I think it was back in the 80s, Japanese Americans who were descendants of the Japanese families as a result of Order number 1066 by FDR, rounding up all the Japanese Americans, mainly out in the western part of the United States, but I think it happened everywhere. And they were sent to what can only be called concentration camps. You're concentrating a certain type of person, in this case, Japanese, into these relocation concentration camps. Well, we did pay, and I'm not sure of how much we paid or what exactly was the reparations made, but we did. And I'm not sure whether they're really satisfied with that uh, or not. And I want to say right now that if anybody should be entitled to reparations, it's the First Peoples, Native Americans, or Indians, whatever you want to call them. Um, they were the ones that I don't want to create a hierarchy of suffering here, but Jesus, it was. Uh, okay, I'm having a brain freeze on the term. Yeah, genocide. Genocide, that's what I'm looking for. That's the only thing that you can call what we did to the Indians. Um, anyway, my point is that if anybody deserves reparations, it's the American Indians. If we're gonna go down that rabbit hole of paying out reparations, geez, there's an awful lot of people that deserve it. The Chinese, that were at various times massacred. There was a massacre down in Los Angeles, and I forget the year, but I read this about 40 or 50 men, women, and children, Chinese, were massacred. I think this occurred back in the 1920s. Anyway, all sorts of racial groups deserve to have reparations. Okay, back right quick to the Greenwood story here. Black Tulsa never really recovered from the devastation that took place 100 years ago this June 1st, when nearly every structure in Greenwood, the fabled Black Wall Street, was flattened and as many as 300 people were killed. Well, it was quite likely more than 300. The Tulsa Race Massacre. This article finally is calling it what it was. The Tulsa Race Massacre is just one of the starkest examples of how black wealth has been sapped again and again by racism and racist violence, forcing generation after generation to start from scratch while shouldering the burden of being black in America. Prior to the massacre, only a couple of generations removed from outright slavery, unfettered black prosperity in America was an urban legend. Although Greenwood, the town of Greenwood, it was a legendary, but it was real. There were very prosperous blacks in Greenwood. Okay, down on Black Wall Street, many black Tulsans spent the money they earned working for white people in a bustling, booming city within a city. That's how they describe it here. So, okay, city within a city. Black-owned grocery stores, soda fountains, cafes, barber shops, a movie theater, music venues, cigar and billiard parlors, tailors and dry cleaners, rooming houses and rental properties. Greenwood had it. Tensions between Tulsa's black and white populations inflamed when on May 31st, 1921, the white-owned Tulsa Tribune. I don't know if that newspaper is still in existence. It probably is. Evil creeps. Published a sensational report describing an alleged assault on Sarah Page. Okay, they say she's 17 here. Other sources have said that she was 15. White girl working as an elevator operator by Dick Rowland, a 19-year-old black shoeshine worker. Rowland was arrested, a mob gathered outside the courthouse, and blah, blah, blah. Some white Tulsans took the sight of angry armed black men as evidence of an impending black uprising. I just told you that there was a pickup load of blacks who were armed, and rightly so. Lynchings, that was kind of the heyday of lynchings. Now, a few living massacre survivors, and they're, in their late 80s and 90s now. Um, let's see. Now, a few living massacre survivors and other victims' descendants are suing for reparations. The defendants include the local Chamber of Commerce, the City Development Authority, and the County Sheriff's Department. The lawsuit seeks to establish a victims' compensation fund paid for by the defendants. I hope they succeed. Okay. All right. It gives me no pleasure to talk about things like this. I've told you before on other Midnight Skeptic shows that, I hate being angry all the time. I hate being negative about things, but geez, this times we live in where our democracy is really, really seriously being threatened by Republicans. And almost all Republicans nowadays are Trumpers. Okay. Let's see. How much time do I have left? Okay, I got time for this. I'm going to try to end this Midnight Skeptic show on a upbeat note. I do have some good news. I had to write this good news down on a napkin because I would certainly forget it if I just tried to remember it on my own. One bit of bad news I want to get out of the way right now. I'm not going to dwell on this. I've talked about this subject on previous shows. The state of Tennessee, living in the dark ages. I'm beginning to, okay. There's a couple of states that personally, I'm sorry about this, YouTube people. I'm rubbing my eye here because it just itches. Okay. Well, YouTube people, sorry about that, but sometimes my eyes itch. All right, live with it. I have to live with it. Why can't you? Okay. There's a few states that I will just never visit in my lifetime. Tennessee is one of them. Arkansas is another. It goes without saying that Alabama and Mississippi I won't bother with. Okay. Anyway, Tennessee. Conservative lawmakers nationwide have, when they say conservative lawmakers, they mean Republicans. Why don't they just say that? Conservative lawmakers nationwide introduced a flurry of anti-LGBTQ bills this year, but no state's political leaders have gone further than Tennessee in enacting new laws targeting transgender people. Across the nation, in Republican-controlled states, there are a flurry of anti-transgender bills being proposed. It just goes to show you what kind of evil bullies the Republicans really are. And this country would be better off, really better off, seriously, if no Republicans were ever elected to any lawmaking office again. And I say that confessing that I am still a registered Republican. Although it's literally been decades since I've actually voted for one. Okay, enough of that. Tennessee, LGBTQ, trans laws. Okay. Why don't they just say that it's GOP lawmakers passed and Republican, they finally identified the party of this jerk. Republican Governor Bill Lee signed 5 new bills into law, consistently dismissing concerns that they discriminate against an already vulnerable population, that some of the laws are unworkable. That's never stopped Republicans. And that they could damage the state's reputation. It's already damaged. They have the that theme park with Noah's Ark built. I mean, that's where that is. What do they call that? Genesis Park? I forget. Anyway, I'll talk about it at some future show. I, I get tired of bashing religion also, which brings me to the next. After I get done with this, I'm going to read Spinoza's thoughts about God. Okay, supporters defend the law's policy by policy, arguing that one protects parental rights, others protect girls and women, and one even improves equality. Lying sacks of shit. Opponents reject these claims. Okay. Colin Goodbread, a 22-year-old transgender student raised in the Nashville suburbs, who attends college in New Hampshire, says that the bevy of new laws could keep him from ever calling Tennessee home again. And this is him, Colin Goodbread. Okay. I wouldn't blame him for never going back again. Tennessee is a crap hole of a Republican-controlled. And he's going to college in Dartmouth. He's a senior there. This is a quote from him. I don't feel like I want to return there. I'm already going to college out of state. I wanted to work out of state. And they meaning Tennessee lawmakers, they've made it abundantly clear that they do not want trans people in the state. Okay, that's so much for that. Okay, my thoughts about religion. I've kind of hinted around at this. I mean, I think on a show I outright said that I'm an atheist, although I'm also a skeptic. So to be open-minded, you have to be open to the possibility of being presented with evidence that of the existence of God. So that makes me an agnostic, although I'm not holding my breath for any such evidence. Okay. When Einstein, yes, that Einstein, the E equals MC squared guy, gave lectures at U.S. universities, the recurring question that students asked him most was, do you believe in God? And he always answered, I believe in the God of Spinoza, Baruch Spinoza, who was a Dutch philosopher back in the mid-1600s. He was actually a Portuguese Sephardic Jew, and they had to flee Portugal because of Catholic intolerance, of course. Okay, so anyway, Spinoza said, and he said, God would say, stop praying. What I want you to do is go out into the world and enjoy your life. I want you to sing, have fun, and enjoy everything I've made for you. Stop going into those dark, cold temples that you built yourself and saying that they are my house, meaning God's house. My house is in the mountains, in the woods, rivers, lakes, beaches. That's where I live, and there I express my love for you. Just time check. Excuse me, YouTube people. Stop reading alleged sacred scriptures that have nothing to do with me. If you can't read me in a sunrise, in a landscape, in the look of your friends, in your son's eyes, you will find me in no book. Stop asking me, quote, will you tell me how to do my job? Stop being so scared of me. I do not judge you or criticize you, nor get angry or bothered. I am pure love. That's what God is saying about himself. Stop asking for forgiveness. There's nothing to forgive. If I made you, I filled you with passions, limitations, pleasures, feelings, need, inconsistencies. In other words, we're all human. Free will. How can I blame you if you respond to something I put into you? How can I punish you for being the way you are if I'm the one who made you? Do you think I could create a place to burn all my children who behave badly for the rest of eternity? What kind of God would do that? Respect your peers and don't do what you don't want for yourself. All I ask is that you pay attention in your life, that alertness is your guide. My beloved, this is not a test, not a step on the way, not a rehearsal, nor a prelude to paradise. This life is the only thing here and now, and it is all you need. I have set you absolutely free. No prizes or punishments, no sins or virtues. No one carries a marker. No one keeps a record. You are absolutely free to create in your life heaven or hell. Boy, isn't that the truth? We create our own hell here on earth. Republicans, are you listening? Dicks. I can't tell you if there's anything after this life, but I can give you a tip. Live as if there is not. As if this is your only chance to enjoy, to love, to exist. So if there's nothing after, then you will have enjoyed the opportunity I gave you. And if there is, rest assured that I won't ask if you've behaved right or wrong. I'll ask, did you like it? Did you have fun? What did you enjoy the most? What did you learn? Stop praising me. What kind of egomaniac God do you think I am? I'm bored being praised. I'm tired of being thanked. Feeling grateful? Prove it by taking care of yourself, your health, your relationships, the world. Express your joy. That's the way to praise me. Stop complicating things and repeating as a parakeet what you've been taught about me. What do you need more miracles for? So many explanations. The only thing for sure is that you are here, and that you are alive, and that this world is full of wonders. Thus spake Baruch Spinoza. I agree with all of those sentiments. I really do. But you would have to search a long, long time and under every rock in the country to find a Republican that believes even part of that. Okay. I promised. Oh, wait a minute. I will. Okay. The latest issue of Time magazine, May 24th, Visions of Equity. This is the cover of it. Okay, what do they mean by visions of equity? They mean how can we all live together and treat each other the same by our laws and by our just things we do day to day. Okay. The equity agenda. All right. That's the first page of this whole section on visions of equity. Okay, I'm not going to read all of these things to you. In fact, I'm not going to read any of them. But if you were to look through this, this looks like it was written by a progressive Democrat or a group of progressive Democrats. Everything that we are admonished to do in this issue of Time magazine looks very progressive to me. None of these articles say that we should disdain people in the LGBTQ community. We should not give blacks anything more than what we as whites think they deserve. None of that crap is in here. Reform the thrifty food plan. Enact universal health care. Here, here. I'm all for that. Integrate the schools. I mean, really integrate them. End family detentions down at the border. Vote. Everybody should be able to vote as easily as possible. No Republican will ever vote for that. Implement universal housing vouchers. Establish a pathway to citizenship. Enhance representation in C-suites and boardrooms. Well, what are C-suites? Those are where the CEOs and the CFOs hang out in these big corporate buildings. Keep police focused on crime. That's another thing that we should do. Okay, anyway, get this copy of Time magazine and read it, and everything in that one section of the magazine is what I would agree with. Okay, I promised you that I would end this segment of the Midnight Skeptic on some good news. And this happened yesterday. A Dutch court in The Hague ruled against Royal Dutch Shell, the fossil fuel company, insisting that they reduce their CO2 emissions and other gaseous emissions by 45% by 2030. There was a bunch of environmentalists that brought a suit in the Netherlands against Royal Shell Company on the very same day, which was yesterday. Chevron, another huge fossil fuel polluter. Okay, KPCA is going to cut me off at 58 minutes, so I've got to get in my play out music. But also, okay, I'm talking about Chevron. A couple of environmentalists were elected to their board of directors, and that is heavy news for Chevron. They are going to try to reduce exploration for new wells. That's one of the things they're going to do. They're going to insist that the Chevron Corporation find out ways to reduce their CO2 and methane emissions and all of that stuff. Okay, on the very same day, yesterday, Exxon elected to their board of directors a couple of environmentally conscious people. And that's the good news. We have come to a place in our corporate history where these corporations are going to have to answer to people that care about the earth. Finally. Okay, quick. I got to play my play-out music. You have been listening to The Midnight Skeptic on KPCA LP, Petaluma, California. And we're at 103.3 on the FM dial and worldwide at www.kpca.fm. Support community radio at patreon.com/Petaluma Community Access. And remember, think critically, think logically, but live joyously, and most importantly, pet your cats. Especially pet your cats. Think logically, think scientifically, think rationally, and if you do all of those things, I guarantee you there's no way that you will ever become a Republican, let alone a Trumper. Okay, that's it for another Midnight Skeptic. The YouTube people, this should be up on YouTube later tonight. The local FM radio listeners to KPCA LP, it's going to be at 9 o'clock this Sunday. Take care, you guys.